Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Tonight I'll be reading you a collection of Reddit stories while Minecraft runs quietly in the background. These stories are here to help you unwind, relax, and let your thoughts drift as the night settles in. Whether you're getting ready to fall asleep, or just want something calm to listen to, this is your safe space to slow down. So grab a cozy spot, take a deep breath, and let's begin tonight's stories. She tried to ruin my wedding. I always thought weddings were supposed to be the happiest day of your life, but mine started with tension the moment the sun rose. I woke up in a hotel room filled with bridesmaids giggling, curling irons buzzing, and the faint scent of perfume lingering in the air. The day should have been perfect, except my sister, Rachel, had been acting strangely for weeks. She had a way of turning every happy event into a competition. Growing up, she always needed to be louder, prettier, more admired. I brushed off her odd comments leading up to the wedding, chalking them up to nerves. But deep down, I knew something was brewing. At breakfast she joked about how she should have been the one walking down the aisle first since she was older. Everyone laughed uncomfortably, but I caught the bitterness in her eyes. I ignored it and told myself she wouldn't ruin my big day. But when we arrived at the venue and I slipped into my white dress, I felt the first pang of dread. Rachel had disappeared. The ceremony was minutes away, guests filing in, music soft and dreamy. I peeked outside, scanning for my sister. And then I saw her. My stomach dropped. She had changed into a long, flowing white gown. Not a pale pastel, not a neutral tone, pure bridal white. Gasps rippled through the bridesmaids when they noticed. One whispered, "Is she serious?" Another muttered, "She's trying to outshine you." I wanted to scream, but the music swelled and it was too late to stop. As I walked down the aisle, all I could feel was the weight of her presence in the corner of my eye. She smiled sweetly at guests, as if she belonged in the spotlight. My groom's jaw tightened when he noticed, but his eyes softened when they met mine. I forced myself to focus on him, on us. The vows felt shaky, the words catching in my throat as Rachel shifted in her seat like she was preparing for a performance. The reception confirmed my worst fears. During the toasts, Rachel stood up uninvited, clutching a champagne flute. She spoke about true love and how sometimes the right person chooses someone else. The room froze. Guests shifted uncomfortably. My new husband stared daggers at her. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, a mix of rage and humiliation. Finally, my father stood and gently guided her back to her seat. The rest of the night was salvaged only because everyone else rallied around us. Looking back, I realized her actions couldn't take away the love I felt when I said, "I do." My wedding was still ours, still sacred. Her attempt to ruin it only showed everyone who she truly was. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. My neighbor stole my garden. When I moved into my house, the thing I loved most was the little garden patch in the backyard. It wasn't much, just a neat rectangle of soil, a wooden fence around it, and enough sunlight to grow herbs, tomatoes, and flowers. It became my sanctuary. Every morning, I'd sip coffee while mist rose off the leaves, the earthy smell grounding me before work. But my neighbor, Mr. Collins, seemed to eye it with envy. He was a gruff man in his 60s, always pacing his yard as if patrolling. At first, I thought he was just curious. He'd ask questions over the fence, what I was planting, how I kept the soil so dark and rich. I'd answer politely, even offering him cuttings. But his tone shifted one day when he said, "That patch used to be part of my yard. Don't get too comfortable." I laughed awkwardly, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. A few weeks later, I came home from work to find the fence gone. My garden, my sanctuary, was flattened. Wooden posts ripped out, tomato plants crushed, flowers trampled. I froze, heart pounding. Mr. Collins stood there with a shovel in hand, dirt caked to his boots. He smirked like he'd won a battle. "This is my property," he barked. "You stole it when you moved in." I'm just taking it back. I scrambled for my deed, the surveyor's map. The garden had always been within my lot. I showed him, voice shaking, but he dismissed it. Paperwork can be wrong, he sneered. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the barren soil where life had once bloomed. I finally called the city. Weeks of back and forth followed, inspectors measuring, lines drawn, documents checked. The verdict? The garden was mine. Officially. Collins had no claim. I thought he would back down, but instead he sulked, muttering insults whenever I passed. I rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, I replanted every herb, every flower, every seed. Neighbors began to notice, stopping by to offer encouragement. Don't let him take your joy, one woman said. And I didn't. When it was over, I realized the garden wasn't just soil and plants. It was a piece of peace I refused to let anyone steal. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. He betrayed me with my best friend. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to live through a cliché. You know, the heartbreaking stories you see online about betrayal that feels too cruel to be real. But that's exactly where I found myself. For 3 years, I had been dating Liam. He wasn't perfect, no one is. But he had this easy smile, the kind that made me feel safe, and a laugh that could cut through even the worst day. My best friend, Emily, had been in my life since middle school. We'd shared everything, secrets, sleepovers, heartbreaks. She was the person I trusted most, the one I thought would stand next to me at my wedding someday. The two of them got along, which always felt like a blessing. I never worried about jealousy or awkwardness. That comfort, it turns out, was the blindfold that kept me from seeing the truth. It started with small things. Emily showing up at places where Liam and I had planned to go. Inside jokes forming between them that I wasn't part of. I brushed it off as harmless, convincing myself I was being paranoid. But late at night, lying awake, doubt gnawed at me. The truth unraveled one rainy afternoon. I had left work early because I felt sick, my head heavy and my stomach twisting. I stopped by Liam's apartment without warning, thinking maybe he'd bring me soup and comfort. Instead, I walked in to find him and Emily on the couch, too close. Their laughter stopped the second they saw me, guilt painted on their faces. Time slowed. My ears rang. My voice cracked when I asked, "What's going on?" Liam stuttered. Emily couldn't even look at me. That silence was my answer. I didn't scream or throw anything. I just stood there as the rain pounded the windows, my heart breaking quietly inside me. I left without another word, the weight of betrayal pressing down with every step I took. The days that followed were a blur. Messages from Emily, pleading that it just happened. Calls from Liam I ignored. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone, wondering how people you love most could hurt you in ways strangers never could. Eventually, I blocked them both. My life became quieter, emptier. But also, strangely, lighter. What I learned was this: trust is fragile, but resilience is stronger. Their betrayal didn't define me, it freed me. And someday, I'll find someone who values loyalty as much as I do. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She took my job from me. I worked at the same marketing firm for nearly 5 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and I was good at what I did. My coworker Jenna joined 2 years after me. At first, we clicked. She was sharp, funny, and ambitious. I admired her drive, even if sometimes it crossed into arrogance. When our manager announced he was retiring, I thought I had a shot at his position. I had the seniority, the track record, the relationships with clients. Jenna congratulated me in advance, telling me, "It's basically yours." Her encouragement made me feel confident. What I didn't know was that while she smiled to my face, she was quietly pulling strings behind the scenes. One morning, I walked into the office to whispers. My name floated in hushed conversations. At lunch, a colleague leaned in and asked if it was true. Had I really missed deadlines, mishandled a client account, lost the firm money? I blinked, confused. None of it was true. But someone had been spreading rumors, carefully planted lies. And the more I looked around, the more I realized who was behind it. Jenna. The next week, when the promotion was announced, my stomach dropped. The new manager? Jenna. She stood at the front of the office, smiling like she had earned it, while my own work had been weaponized against me. My boss congratulated her and said something vague about a fresh approach, not even meeting my eyes. The betrayal cut deeper than losing a title. It was losing trust in someone I'd considered a friend. I considered quitting, walking out, burning the bridges behind me. But I stayed. And quietly, I rebuilt my reputation. I worked harder than ever, not for the company, but for myself. Slowly, the truth surfaced. Clients spoke up about my reliability. Coworkers began to see through her shallow charm. Looking back, I realized her betrayal wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of knowing my own worth. The job wasn't stolen. It was given away. And I didn't need someone else's title to prove my value. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She took my dog while I was at work. Max isn't just a dog to me. He's the soft thump at the end of my bed every night, the warm exhale against my ankle when a nightmare tries to claw its way into morning, the sloppy kiss that interrupts every sad thought before it gets momentum. I adopted him 2 summers ago, a skittish shelter mutt who flinched at raised voices and learned to trust in increments. First the treat from my palm, then the leaning weight across my shins when storms rattled the windows. I built my life around that trust, early walks before sunrise, a frayed tennis ball on the hallway rug, a routine that fit our rhythm. When I started dating Claire, she slid into that rhythm easily. She bought him the ridiculous shark hoodie. She taught him, spin, for treats. She took 1,000 photos of his head tilt. And then, when we broke up, messily, after too many small resentments stacked into a wall, she said the sentence that made me feel suddenly 14 again. He loves me more. I shrugged it off as breakup bravado. We arranged the practical things, boxes, a key drop-off, a no-contact rule for our own sanity, and I went back to the quiet comfort of Max's snore, to the normalcy of 2 bowls at the mat, and muddy paw prints fading on the kitchen tile. The Thursday it happened felt aggressively normal. Coffee that tasted like cardboard, a bus ride with fogged windows, the office humming fluorescent and indifferent. I ate a late sandwich at my desk, glanced at the camera feed on my phone, the thrift store webcam angled at the front door more for package theft than anything sinister, and saw nothing but my own front hall, still and gray. I texted the dog walker. She sent a thumbs up and a picture of Max smiling against the park's winter-brown grass. I exhaled. Life, mundane and safe, stayed on its rails. Twilight had already climbed the buildings when I unlocked the apartment. The air inside held that familiar dog smell, cornchip paws, wool blanket, simple animal presence. Max? I sang down the hall, dropping my bag. Silence answered. His squeaky fox toy sat unshoed on the mat. The water bowl was full. No collar jingle, no toenails clicking on wood. I walked room to room, calling softer then louder, my voice turning thin. Closets open. Shower curtain pulled back. Under the bed. Behind the couch. Nothing. A thought I didn't want blossomed anyway. I checked the webcam's timeline. At 2:41 p.m., the front door opened. The angle was bad, but the figure was unmistakable in the way she moved, the hurry in her shoulders, the knit beanie she always wore when the temperature dropped. Claire stepped inside, crouched out of frame, and then Max's tail flashed, a wagging blur. In 10 seconds, she had him on a leash. In 15, she was back out the door. No struggle. No hesitation. My hands shook as I called her. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "You can't do this. He's my dog. Please bring him back." The bubbles appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Finally, "I'm only taking what's mine. He'll be happier with me. Don't make this harder." I called the non-emergency police line, my voice too calm because panic had burned itself clean already. The officer explained it was a civil matter, that if both parties claimed ownership, I would need proof. Vaccination records, microchip registration, adoption papers. I pulled a shoebox of documents onto the floor and scattered them like leaves. Max's intake photo smiled up at me from a creased printout, his kennel number written in blue Sharpie. His microchip certificate had my name, my address, the date I paid the fee in cash and cried in the parking lot because I was finally responsible for a creature that needed me. I emailed the shelter. I called the microchip company. I sent the police a copy of everything, trembling with the effort not to scream into a living room that had never felt so empty. Night thinned into a gray, sleepless morning. At 8:13 a.m., Animal Control called back. "We've spoken with the other party," the woman on the line said, voice professional but kind. "She's claiming shared ownership, but the documents you provided show sole adoption and registration. We're going to mediate a return." We met in the lobby of my building because it was neutral ground. The winter air tasted like coins. Claire arrived late, Max tucked against her jacket, his eyes bright but confused. He pulled toward me, whined, then looked between us like the world had picked up a rule he couldn't read. I knelt and let him come on his terms. When his forehead pressed into my collarbone, my chest finally unlocked. "You can visit," she said brittle. "He loves me." I shook my head. "He loves a lot of people. That's who he is. But I'm his person." I kept my voice quiet, not for her, but for Max, because he learned the meaning of noise before I ever knew him. The officer documented the exchange. The leash traded hands. We rode the elevator up, Max sitting between my shoes, tail thumping when the doors dinged. When it was over, I set 2 bowls on the mat and watched him drink, then fall asleep so deeply his mouth puffed little dog size. I changed the locks. I sent one last text, "Please don't come back. He's safe." Then I blocked her, not from anger, but from the simple promise that my home would return to its soft, ordinary heartbeat. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. He drained our savings for crypto. Before the charts, before the jargon, before candles meant anything but birthdays, we had a plan taped to the refrigerator. 2 columns, hers, mine. A shared timeline for a down payment with doodled stars at the 12 and 24-month marks. We had spreadsheets that balanced like a quiet hymn. We cooked at home, skipped takeout unless it was a Friday we'd circled in blue, watched movies on the couch and counted that as a kind of wealth too. The savings account wasn't glamorous, but it was a little boat with our names on it, tied to a dock we could see. Then the world got loud about opportunity. My boyfriend, call him Nate, started staying up late with his laptop glow painting his face a constant dawn. Words I'd never heard began to migrate into our kitchen conversations: decentralized, staking, gas fees. He sent me screenshots of charts that looked like roller coasters and said, "If we'd put in 1,000 last month, we'd have 5 now." He promised he wasn't gambling, he was investing in the future. I teased him about joining a cult of lion worshippers. Still, something in his voice, bright, shaky, hungry, made me place a hand on the refrigerator plan like a talisman. At first, it stayed small. $50 here, $100 there. He celebrated tiny green spikes and shrugged at red ones. He watched a man on YouTube whose whole personality was confidence. On Saturday mornings he'd take coffee to the patio and whisper at the phone like a secret was about to unfold. If I asked how much he had in, he waved it off. "Just play money," he said. "I'd never touch our savings." He kissed my forehead the way people do when they want a conversation to end with something that feels like tenderness. I found out on accident. A Tuesday, rain crawling down the window like someone dialing down the world. I logged into our bank app to transfer money to pay a dentist bill. The number sat there, wrong in a way that made the room tilt. 4 digits lower than yesterday. I blinked, closed the app, opened it again. Lower still, as if the number itself was falling in real time. My chest tightened. I scrolled transaction history. There they were, 3 transfers from savings to checking in amounts that looked like losing hands. A fourth to a crypto exchange I'd only ever seen as a logo in his tabs. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom. Nate's laptop was open, charts pulsing slick and alive. "Did you take money from our savings?" I asked. My voice came out small, polite, as if I was a guest and not the other name on the account. He didn't look up. "It's temporary," he said. "There was a dip. It's the perfect entry. I'll put it back by Friday." "You took $3,000, I said. Saying the number out loud made it legitimate. It entered the air like a third person. He finally met my eyes. The confidence from the YouTube man slipped. A boyish fear peeked through. "I'm doing this for us," he said. "Everyone else is getting ahead. Why are we choosing the slowest path?" I wanted to tell him that the slow path was a kind of love story. Our breakfast bowls stacked on a drying rack, the way we folded each other's laundry without scorekeeping, how the plan taped to the refrigerator had earned its tape stains. Instead, I sat down on the edge of the bed because my knees didn't trust me. "Put it back," I said. "Today." He nodded, but the nod wasn't an agreement, it was a delay. The fall didn't happen in one dramatic crash, but in 1,000 little slips. Each temporary transfer grew teeth. Each promise to move it back after this bounce dissolved into a new explanation, a new chart, a new certainty that the next hour would be the hour. I watched our boat untie itself from the dock. I watched the water turn rough. The night I packed a bag was quiet. No fight, no plates, no shouted ultimatum. Just me standing in front of the refrigerator, fingers on our plan, tracing the ink with a thumb until the paper went warm against my skin. He came into the kitchen and leaned on the doorframe like he could casually hold up the world. "I can make it back," he said, voice breaking around the edges. "I know where I went wrong. You took away my choice," I said. "Not the money, though that hurts. You took away the story I thought we were writing." I put the plan in my bag because I didn't want to leave it like trash. I left the key on the counter because I didn't want to pretend I was still part of his strategy. Looking back, I learned that security isn't a number as much as it's a behavior, showing your receipts, admitting when you don't know, refusing to bet love on luck. I rebuilt with a checking account that only had my name on it, and a new plan taped to a different fridge. Slow is still a kind of fast when what you're building is meant to last. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She lied about being pregnant. I had been dating Kayla for about 8 months when she dropped the news. We were sitting in her car, the windows fogged from the rain outside, when she turned to me and whispered, "I'm pregnant." My world tilted. I wasn't ready to be a father, but I also wasn't the type to walk away. I held her hands and told her we'd figure it out together. Her eyes shimmered, and for a moment I thought we were bonded in something bigger than us. The following weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments she never let me attend, cravings that seemed too theatrical, and late-night conversations about names and nurseries. She told me her parents didn't know yet and begged me to keep it between us. I did, carrying the secret like a stone in my chest. I started saving more aggressively, even sold my gaming console to pad a baby fund. Every time I handed her cash for appointments, she squeezed my arm and told me she loved me. But doubts began to creep in. When I asked to come with her to an ultrasound, she said she didn't want me to miss work. When I suggested we tell her parents, she changed the subject. I wanted to trust her, but something about the way she always dodged my eyes made my stomach twist. One Saturday morning, I showed up at her apartment unannounced. She opened the door in pajamas, clearly startled to see me. On the coffee table sat a takeout bag from a sushi place, raw rolls she used to say were her favorite. My heart stuttered. "I thought you weren't supposed to eat that while pregnant," I said gently. She froze, then laughed too quickly. "It's cooked tuna. Don't worry." Later that day, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed with a message preview that made my blood run cold. When are you going to tell him the truth? My hands shook as I put the phone down before she came out. I couldn't confront her yet, not without proof, but the seed of suspicion had grown into a full vine wrapping tight around my ribs. The following week, I asked again if I could come to her next doctor's visit. She snapped, saying I didn't trust her and that my pressure was stressing her out. I apologized, desperate not to lose her or the baby. Still, the doubt gnawed. The truth came out one evening when I arrived early to pick her up. Her roommate was in the kitchen, sipping tea, and she looked at me with pity. "You really don't know, do you?" she asked quietly. My stomach dropped. She explained that Kayla had never been pregnant. It was a lie to keep me close, to test if I'd stay loyal. The appointments were afternoons out shopping. The cash I'd given her was gone. When Kayla walked in and saw my face, she knew the game was over. She cried, begged, said she only lied because she was afraid of losing me. But all I felt was hollow. My trust had been shattered. I left that night and never looked back. When it was over, I realized love built on lies isn't love at all. It's manipulation wearing a mask. I deserved honesty, even if the truth was painful. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. He tried to steal my inheritance. My grandmother was the kind of woman who baked pies without recipes and pressed crumpled bills into your hand with a wink. She didn't have much, but what she did have was earned through decades of work in a small-town diner. When she passed, she left behind her house and a modest savings account. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was her final gift. The will was clear, the house and savings were mine. My cousin Daniel, however, saw it differently. From the day of the funeral, he started making comments. She always said I was like the son she never had, he claimed, ignoring the fact that he rarely visited. He called me lucky, but the way he said it made it sound like I'd stolen something. At first, I brushed it off as grief talking. But within weeks, he escalated. He began showing up at the house uninvited, claiming he had rights to look around. One night, I came home to find him rummaging through drawers. "Just looking for photos," he said with a smirk. My gut told me it wasn't photos he was after. The breaking point came when I discovered he'd contacted the estate lawyer, insisting the will was unfair. He even suggested that Grandma had been manipulated into signing it. The audacity left me speechless. The lawyer assured me the will was ironclad, but Daniel's constant interference left me drained. I started locking every door and window, feeling like a stranger in the home I had inherited. One afternoon, I caught him trying to pry open the garage door. Rage surged through me. "You need to stop," I shouted. "This isn't yours." He just shrugged, muttering, "It should have been." That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Grandma's old teapot, and felt the weight of her absence heavier than ever. Finally, I took legal action. A restraining order was filed, and the police gave him a warning. It wasn't easy, it felt strange to drag family into court, but the alternative was letting him chip away at the last piece of Grandma I had left. Over time, he backed off, though the bitterness lingered whenever our paths crossed at family gatherings. Looking back, I realized inheritance isn't just money or property, it's memory, legacy, and love. Daniel could never take that from me, no matter how hard he tried. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She tried to replace me with her ex. I'd been dating Nia for a little over a year, and I thought we were solid. We had our routines, lazy Sunday breakfasts, movie marathons when it rained, the small comfort of brushing our teeth side by side before bed. But something shifted when her ex, Tyler, moved back into town. At first, it seemed harmless. He dated her in high school, years before we met. They were just friends now, she insisted, rolling her eyes like I was silly for even asking. Still, I noticed the texts. Little pings lighting up her phone at midnight. I noticed the way she laughed harder at his jokes than she ever did at mine. "You're imagining things," she said when I brought it up, but her cheeks flushed too quickly, and the silence that followed was heavy. I wanted to believe her, but doubt sank its teeth into me. The breaking point came during her birthday party. I had planned the whole night, decorations, her favorite cake, even a playlist of songs we both loved. Friends filled the living room, laughter bouncing off the walls. Then Tyler walked in. She hadn't told me she invited him. Suddenly, it felt like the room tilted in his direction. She hovered near him, refilling his drink, touching his arm, her eyes glowing in a way that left me standing invisible. Later that night, I overheard them on the balcony. He told her he missed what they had. She laughed softly, a sound I hadn't heard in months. My chest tightened as I realized I was listening to the undoing of everything we built. I confronted her, asking why she let him back in. She stared at me with wide eyes, caught between guilt and defiance, then said words that sliced deep. "Maybe I do miss him." I left that night with my heart in pieces. In the days that followed, she tried to reach out, claiming she was confused, that she needed time to figure things out. But I knew the truth. If she needed to compare me to her past, she'd already made her choice. I blocked her number and packed away the photos of us. It hurt, but I wasn't going to be the placeholder while she decided who she loved. When it was over, I learned that real love doesn't leave you questioning your place in someone's life. If you're not their first choice, you're not their choice at all. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. My roommate tried to ruin my life. When I first moved in with Alex, it felt like a perfect match. He was laid back, cracked jokes at the right moments, and always had the fridge stocked with snacks. For the first few months, things went smoothly. We split bills, cleaned up after ourselves, and even had late-night talks that felt like real friendship. But cracks started forming. He began borrowing my clothes without asking, then returning them stained or stretched. He'd throw parties on nights I needed sleep, brushing off my frustration with a laugh. The final straw came when I noticed money missing from the jar we used for shared groceries. He swore he hadn't touched it, but I knew better. The tension grew heavier each week. I started locking my bedroom door, but somehow he always found ways to get in. One morning, I woke to find my laptop open on the kitchen table. He claimed he just needed to check something real quick, but my gut told me he had snooped through my files. Soon after, I got an email from my boss about a strange message sent from my work account, something I never wrote. The realization hit like ice water. Alex was sabotaging me. I confronted him, shaking with anger. He smirked, denying everything, and told me if I couldn't handle it, I should move out. But I couldn't afford to, at least not yet. Each day felt like a game of survival in my own home. Eventually, I started documenting everything, missing items, altered emails, even recordings of his outbursts. Armed with proof, I took it to our landlord. The response was swift. Alex was given notice to leave. When he found out, he exploded, shouting that I'd ruined his life. But deep down, I knew the truth. He tried to ruin mine first. Looking back, I realized that protecting your peace sometimes means walking away from people you thought were friends. Living alone afterward felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in months. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She tried to control every part of my life. At first, dating Sarah felt like being wrapped in a warm blanket. She wanted to know everything about me, my favorite food, the songs I listened to when I couldn't sleep, even the brand of shampoo I used. It felt flattering, like I was finally with someone who truly cared. But over time, her curiosity hardened into control. It started small. She'd comment on my clothes, suggesting I looked better in darker colors. Then she began questioning my friends, asking why I needed to spend time with them when I had her. I brushed it off as insecurity, telling myself it was normal in relationships to compromise. But deep down, I felt the walls closing in. Things escalated when she insisted on having all my passwords. For transparency. I hesitated, but she framed it as a test of trust. Against my better judgment, I gave them to her. Soon she was reading my emails, scrolling through my messages, even checking my bank statements. Whenever I confronted her, she claimed it was because she loved me too much to lose me. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted, only to find her pacing my apartment. She accused me of cheating because I hadn't answered her text quickly enough. My explanations meant nothing. Her jealousy was eating the relationship alive. The final straw came when she called my boss pretending to be me, asking about my schedule. My boss pulled me aside the next day, concerned about my girlfriend's behavior. I felt humiliated. That was when I realized this wasn't love. It was control disguised as care. When I ended things, she begged, cried, and promised to change. But I knew if I stayed, I'd lose myself completely. Looking back, I realized love should feel like freedom, not a cage. Walking away wasn't just about ending a relationship, it was about saving myself. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. My friend tried to steal my partner. I always believed loyalty was the foundation of friendship. My best friend Mark had been by my side for years. We'd gone through college together, late-night pizza runs, heartbreaks, and hangovers. When I introduced him to my girlfriend, Lily, I thought it was natural they'd get along. I never expected him to cross the line. At first, it seemed innocent. They joked together at group hangouts, sometimes sharing memes in our group chat. But then I noticed Lily laughing at her phone late at night, and when I asked, she said it was just something funny Mark sent. I didn't think much of it until I saw the frequency of their conversations. It was constant. The turning point came one evening when I borrowed Lily's phone to look something up. A message thread from Mark sat open. My stomach twisted as I scrolled, flirty comments, inside jokes I didn't understand, and even late night. I wish it was just you and me. Messages from him. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized my best friend had been making a move on the person I loved most. When I confronted Lily, she admitted she hadn't shut him down because she didn't want to cause drama between us. She swore she never crossed a line, but I couldn't shake the betrayal. I confronted Mark next, and instead of apologizing, he shrugged and said, "If she wanted me, she'd pick me." That moment shattered both relationships. I cut ties with Mark completely, and Lily and I spent weeks trying to rebuild trust. In the end, though, the damage lingered too deep. We broke up not long after. I felt like I'd lost two of the most important people in my life at once. When it was over, I realized betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. It often comes from the people closest to you. It taught me to guard my heart more carefully and to pay attention to red flags, even from those I thought I could trust. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She lied about her identity. We met online, the way so many people do these days. Her name was Hannah, at least, that's what she told me. She had an easy charm in messages, the kind that made hours disappear as we typed back and forth. Her photos showed a girl with warm eyes and a smile that seemed almost shy. I felt like I'd stumbled onto something rare, someone who understood me without judgment. We talked for weeks before finally deciding to meet in person. She suggested a quiet cafe downtown. I arrived early, palms sweating, heart racing. Minutes passed. Then an hour. My coffee grew cold. She never showed. My phone buzzed later with an apology. Family emergency. I tried to shake off the disappointment, telling myself things happen. But as time went on, excuses piled up, missed calls, sudden cancellations. Each time, she had a story that felt just convincing enough to hold me in place. One night, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled on a familiar face. It was her. Or at least, the girl from the photos. But her name wasn't Hannah, and her posts didn't match the stories she had told me. My stomach dropped. I messaged the account, desperate for answers. She replied within minutes, confused. She had no idea who I was. Someone had stolen her pictures and created an entire persona around them. I confronted Hannah in our chat, and the truth finally cracked open. She admitted her real name was something else, that she'd used fake photos because she didn't think anyone would talk to the real her. I stared at the screen, a mix of anger, pity, and exhaustion churning inside me. We never spoke again after that night. I deleted her number, blocked her accounts, and sat in silence, trying to understand how I'd let myself be drawn so deep into an illusion. Looking back, I realized connection built on lies is no connection at all. I'd fallen for an image, a carefully crafted mask, not a person. And though it hurt, I promised myself I'd never ignore red flags again. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. My brother stole from me. Family is supposed to be the one group of people you can trust without hesitation. That's what I believed, until the day I realized my brother, Aaron, had been stealing from me. We grew up close, sharing toys, secrets, and late-night whispers under the same roof. Even as adults, I always felt protective of him. When he lost his job, I told him he could crash on my couch until he got back on his feet. At first, it was fine. He helped with dishes, cracked jokes while we played video games, even cooked dinner once or twice. But soon, things started to feel off. My wallet never seemed to have the same amount of cash I remembered. Small items, headphones, a watch, disappeared from my room. I convinced myself I was just forgetful. Then one morning, I logged into my bank account and noticed several strange charges. Gas stations across town, late-night fast food runs. My stomach tightened as I realized my card had been used without my permission. I confronted Aaron that night. He denied everything at first, eyes wide with fake innocence. But when I pressed harder, showing him the receipts, his shoulders slumped. I just needed some cash, he muttered. I was gonna pay you back. My chest burned with anger and sadness all at once. It wasn't about the money, it was about the trust he'd broken. I gave him an ultimatum: stop stealing and be honest with me, or leave. He promised he'd change, swearing on everything he had left. For a while, I tried to believe him. But a week later, my laptop was gone. Pawned off, I later found out, for a quick buck. That was the end of the line. I told him to pack his things and leave. It broke me to say it, but I couldn't let him drag me down any further. Months later, he reached out, saying he'd gotten help and wanted to rebuild our relationship. I'm still not sure if I can trust him again. When it was over, I realized that family doesn't give someone the right to hurt you without consequence. Sometimes love means drawing a line, even if it hurts to stand behind it. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She used me for my money. When I first met Vanessa, I thought she was dazzling. She had a way of lighting up every room she walked into. Our first date was simple, coffee and a walk downtown. But by the end of the night, she had me laughing harder than I had in months. I told myself I was lucky, that maybe I'd finally found someone who saw me for who I was. But the requests started small. She'd forget her wallet at dinner. She'd ask me to cover gas because she was low until payday. At first, I didn't mind. I wanted to be generous. But soon, it became a pattern. She never seemed to have money when we went out, yet she always had new clothes, fresh manicures, and expensive shoes. I ignored the red flags because being with her felt intoxicating. My friends warned me, hinting she might be using me, but I pushed back. I told myself they just didn't see the sweet side of her. Deep down, though, I felt the unease growing. One evening, she called me in tears, saying her rent was overdue and she might get kicked out. Panicked, I wired her $800, money I'd been saving for car repairs. She thanked me endlessly, promising she'd pay me back the following week. That week came and went, and then another. Each time I asked, she had a new excuse. Then came the emergencies. A broken phone. A medical bill she swore her insurance didn't cover. Every time I thought about saying no, she'd cry or threaten to leave me. My bank account began to dwindle, but my pride kept me silent. I didn't want to admit I'd been taken advantage of. The truth hit me like a brick when a mutual friend posted a photo of Vanessa on vacation, drinks in hand, smiling on a beach. She hadn't been struggling. She'd been living large off my kindness. My chest burned with betrayal. That night I ended it. She didn't even fight me, just shrugged and blocked my number. Looking back, I realized love shouldn't drain you dry. It should build you up, not hollow you out. I learned that generosity without boundaries is just a trap waiting to be sprung. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. My friend betrayed me at work. I've always believed that friends can make the workplace feel less like a grind. That's why I was excited when my best friend from college, Ethan, landed a job at the same office as me. We joked for years about how fun it would be to work side by side. For the first few months, it was exactly that: coffee runs, shared playlists, inside jokes whispered during long meetings. But when a promotion opened up, things shifted. We both applied, and I assumed it would be a friendly competition. "May the best man win," Ethan said with a grin. I believed him. I didn't realize how far he was willing to go. Soon, I noticed whispers around the office. My supervisor pulled me aside, asking about mistakes I supposedly made, late reports, missed deadlines. I was stunned. None of it was true. I worked late, double-checking everything, trying to prove myself. Still, the rumors spread. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of Ethan in the break room, talking to a manager. He was shaking his head and sighing like he was disappointed in me. My stomach dropped. Later, I overheard him saying I wasn't leadership material, that I cracked under pressure. It felt like a knife in the back. When the promotion was announced, it went to Ethan. He celebrated loudly, clapping me on the back like we were still friends. I forced a smile, but inside I was hollow. A few weeks later, one of my colleagues pulled me aside and admitted they'd seen Ethan altering files on my computer, sabotage I'd never imagined. I reported it quietly to HR, giving them the evidence. They launched an investigation, and though Ethan kept his title, his reputation never recovered. Our friendship, once unshakable, was over. When it was over, I realized not everyone who laughs with you has your back. Sometimes jealousy hides behind a smile. And in the workplace, loyalty should never be taken for granted. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She lied about where she was going. Trust had always been the foundation of my relationship with Jenna. We didn't have a perfect relationship, but we had a rule: no secrets, no half-truths. We promised each other that honesty would always come first. That's why it felt like my entire world tilted when I started noticing cracks in the stories she told me. It began with little inconsistencies. She'd say she was going out for dinner with her best friend, but later that same night when I casually asked her how it went, she'd fumble the details. Sometimes she'd get the restaurant wrong, or she'd mention a movie they supposedly watched when I knew that particular friend was out of town. I brushed it off at first, telling myself I was overanalyzing. Relationships don't survive without trust, and I didn't want to be the paranoid partner. But the lies grew bolder. There were entire nights where her phone went straight to voicemail. "Girls' night," she'd text the next morning, paired with a heart emoji. But when I bumped into one of her supposed friends later in the week, she looked genuinely confused and admitted they hadn't seen Jenna in months. The pit in my stomach grew deeper. The final straw in this slow buildup of doubt came one weekend when she left her purse on the kitchen counter. Inside was a receipt, nothing extraordinary on its own, except the timestamp matched a night she told me she stayed in to binge Netflix. It was for dinner for two at an upscale restaurant across town, a place I knew she'd never casually visit alone. My hands trembled as I held it, reading the neat print over and over, my chest tight with dread. In that moment, I realized something wasn't just off. Something was being hidden from me. The Jenna I thought I knew, the person I believed would never betray me, was weaving lies right in front of my face. The receipt gnawed at me for days. Every time she smiled at me, every time she kissed me goodnight, I felt the weight of it in my pocket like a secret burning through fabric. I debated confronting her immediately, but a part of me wanted undeniable proof before I spoke. I didn't want to accuse her only to be told I was paranoid again. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. She mentioned she was going to have dinner with the girls on Friday. She even dressed up, hair curled, perfume lingering heavy in the room, the kind of effort she rarely put in for casual hangouts. My instincts screamed. I told her to have fun and forced a smile, but as soon as the door closed behind her, I grabbed my keys. I followed from a distance, heart pounding like I was committing a crime. My palms were slick on the steering wheel as I trailed her car through the dimly lit streets. Finally, she pulled into the parking lot of a restaurant, far from the one she'd claimed she was going to. I parked 2 blocks away, waiting, my chest tightening with every passing second. When she walked inside, I gave it a few minutes before edging close enough to peek through the window. And that's when my world shattered. There she was, seated across from a man I had never seen before, her body language so open and relaxed it was obvious they were comfortable with each other. She leaned forward, laughing in a way I hadn't heard from her in months. He reached across the table, brushing her hand casually, like it was something he had done countless times before. I staggered back, the sound of blood rushing in my ears. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't some harmless dinner. It was betrayal, clear as day, playing out behind glass. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, knowing there was no going back from what I'd just seen. When Jenna came home later that night, I was waiting at the kitchen table. She walked in with a rehearsed smile, dropping her purse on the counter like nothing had happened. "Girls' night was fun," she said casually, pulling off her heels. I placed the receipt in front of her. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she tried to laugh it off. "Oh, that? I grabbed dinner with a coworker. You're overreacting." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she picked up the paper. "Don't lie to me again," I said quietly. "I followed you tonight. I saw you with him." The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she might fight it, might spin another web of excuses. But instead, she sighed and collapsed into the chair across from me. "Fine," she whispered. "Yes, I've been seeing him. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I needed something different." Her words sliced through me. Different. As if I hadn't given her everything I had, as if our love was just a phase she'd grown out of. I stared at her, trying to find the girl I thought I knew, but all I saw was a stranger who had chosen deception over honesty. I ended it then and there. She cried, begged me to reconsider, but my heart had already hardened. Trust, once broken, doesn't return. I packed her things into boxes over the next few days, the apartment echoing with silence where laughter once lived. Looking back, I realized something powerful: honesty isn't optional in a relationship. It's the foundation, the glue that holds everything else together. Without it, even the strongest bond crumbles to dust. Jenna didn't just lie about where she was going, she lied about who she was when she looked me in the eyes. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. My dad walked out and took everything. I was 16 the night my dad left, though in truth it felt like I aged 10 years in that single moment. The evening started like any other. We just finished dinner. Me pushing peas around my plate, Mom quietly humming as she washed dishes, Dad sitting at the table reading the paper. There was nothing in his voice, no shift in his posture, nothing at all that warned me this was going to be the night my life turned upside down. When I woke up the next morning, it was to the sound of my mom crying. Not just crying, sobbing so deeply I could feel it in the walls. I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, and walked into the living room. That's when I saw it: emptiness. The TV was gone. The recliner where Dad always sat was missing. Even the family photos that lined the hallway had disappeared overnight. It looked like a stranger's house, hollowed out and stripped of the life we had built inside it. My mom was sitting on the floor surrounded by open drawers, whispering through tears. "He took everything, he took it all." She held my baby pictures in her lap, the only ones he hadn't grabbed, and rocked back and forth like she was trying to soothe herself. My chest tightened as I realized this wasn't a mistake, not some burglary, it was him. He had chosen to vanish, and in the process he had gutted our home of every piece of himself. I searched every corner, hoping to find something he'd left behind, a pair of shoes, a book, anything that proved he hadn't meant to erase himself so completely. But there was nothing. His closet was bare, his dresser drawers empty. Even the mug he used every morning for coffee was gone from the cupboard. It was like he wanted to erase the evidence that he'd ever been part of our lives. And in that instant, the truth sank in, he hadn't just walked out. He had abandoned us. The days that followed felt like living in a nightmare on repeat. Every morning I woke expecting to hear his footsteps in the hallway or the sound of his keys jingling by the door, but the silence mocked me. Mom tried to hold it together, but I saw the exhaustion in her face. Bills started piling up on the kitchen counter: electricity, rent, car insurance. Without Dad's paycheck, we were drowning almost immediately. I picked up a part-time job bagging groceries after school. It wasn't much, but every dollar I handed to Mom felt like a lifeline. She never asked me to help, but the relief in her eyes when I dropped cash on the table was worth more than any paycheck. The weight of responsibility pressed down hard, heavier than any textbook or homework assignment. I wasn't just a teenager anymore. I was someone who had to keep the lights on. At school, I kept the truth hidden. My friends would complain about their dads being strict or not letting them borrow the car, and I'd laugh along like I understood. Inside, bitterness gnawed at me. They didn't know what it was like to stare at an empty chair at the dinner table, to hear your mom cry herself to sleep, to watch your childhood dissolve overnight. The worst part wasn't even the missing furniture or the unpaid bills. It was the sense of betrayal. Dad had always told me family came first. He'd said it like a mantra, drilling it into me whenever I skipped chores or complained about rules. And then, when things got hard, he was the one who ran. He didn't just leave my mom, he left me. He left the version of me that still needed him. I stopped asking questions like, why? Or, where did he go? Because there were no answers that could fix the hole he'd left behind. All I could do was adjust to a new reality where he no longer existed in my world. Years passed, and though the pain dulled, the memory of that morning never left me. Eventually, word trickled back through distant relatives. He'd remarried in another city, started a new family, and never once reached out. No phone calls, no letters, no birthday cards. It was as if I had been erased from his story, replaced by people who never knew the man who used to sit at our table. By the time I turned 18, I had built a new rhythm. Mom and I learned how to survive on our own. We sold what little was left that reminded us of him and slowly replaced the emptiness with things that felt like ours. A thrift store couch. Second-hand dishes. New photos pinned to the walls, smiles that didn't include him. Piece by piece, the house became a home again. When I look back now, I don't just see the night he left. I see the strength that was forced into me, the resilience I didn't know I had. I see the way my mom became both parents, carrying burdens she should never have had to bear. I see the kid I was, angry, confused, but determined not to let his absence define my future. The truth is, he may have taken everything material from us, but he couldn't take away the lessons that hardship left behind. I learned that family isn't about words like blood or duty. It's about the people who stay when staying is hardest. It's about those who fight alongside you, even when they're exhausted. Looking back, I realized my dad's disappearance wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of me learning how to stand on my own. His absence carved out a space in me, and I filled it with strength, love, and resilience that he could never take. And that's the end of this story. Here's the next one. She tried to turn everyone against me. Friendship, to me, always meant loyalty. The kind where you could show up at someone's door at midnight and know they'd open it without hesitation. That's what I thought I had with Claire. We'd been inseparable since high school, late-night study sessions, shared heartbreaks, endless inside jokes. When we ended up working at the same office years later, I thought it was fate, like the universe had tied our lives together for good. At first, everything was perfect. We sat together at lunch, backed each other up in meetings, and shared the same commute. People at work even joked that we were like sisters. But slowly, the tone shifted. I noticed coworkers giving me strange looks, conversations going quiet when I entered the break room. At first, I brushed it off as paranoia. Offices are full of gossip. Maybe I was just imagining it. Then the whispers started reaching me directly. A colleague hinted that I had been bad-mouthing others behind their backs. Another asked if it was true I was applying for jobs elsewhere. Each rumor hit like a punch to the gut, because not only were they were lies that could ruin my career. The pit in my stomach deepened when I realized the common thread: Claire. She was always there, just close enough to listen, just close enough to twist my words into something ugly. I wanted to confront her, but I hesitated. Part of me clung to the belief that she wouldn't do this to me. That she couldn't. But the weight of suspicion grew heavier with each passing day, pressing down until I could no longer ignore it. The breaking point came when my boss called me into his office. He leaned back in his chair, concern etched into his face, and asked if it was true I'd been looking for other jobs. "We value you here," he said. "But if you're planning to leave, I need to know." My throat went dry. I hadn't applied anywhere. I hadn't even updated my resume. I shook my head furiously, insisting it wasn't true, but the doubt in his eyes told me the seed had already been planted. I walked out of his office shaking, rage and betrayal boiling in my chest. I knew exactly who had whispered that lie. Claire. She was the only one who knew my passing comment about being burned out, and somehow she twisted it into proof that I was disloyal. I started connecting dots. Every rumor, every side-eye glance, every cold shoulder in the break room, it all led back to her. She wasn't just gossiping. She was orchestrating something. That night, I replayed years of our friendship in my head, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. Was she jealous? Did she see me as competition? Or had I been blind all along to the kind of person she really was? The thought made me nauseous. I began quietly gathering proof. I asked colleagues where they had heard certain rumors. More than once, Claire's name slipped out. One even admitted they had overheard her framing her gossip as concern, like she was just worried about me. It was insidious. She wasn't just lying, she was weaponizing our friendship, making it seem like she was protecting me while she twisted the knife deeper. Armed with proof, I confronted her one Friday after work. We were alone in the parking lot, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the asphalt. My voice trembled, but I held my ground. "I know it's been you," I said. "You've been spreading lies about me. You've been trying to turn everyone against me." Her reaction wasn't guilt, it was laughter. She actually laughed, shaking her head as if I were the ridiculous one. "You're too sensitive," she sneered. "If people believe what I say, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." Her words were like poison, confirming everything I had feared but hadn't wanted to admit. She didn't see me as a friend at all. I was competition, an obstacle, someone she needed to tear down to make herself look better. I walked away from her that night, and I never looked back. On Monday, I took my proof to HR. They launched an investigation, and while nothing explosive came of it, her reputation was forever damaged. People began to see her for what she was. The whispers died down, replaced with awkward silence whenever she entered a room. Looking back, I realized betrayal doesn't always come in dramatic explosions. Sometimes it comes in whispers, slow and deliberate, from the people you trust most. Claire didn't just spread lies, she tried to rewrite who I was in the eyes of everyone around me. But in the end, the truth surfaced, and I learned to value the people who choose honesty over jealousy. When it was over, I realized protecting my peace sometimes means cutting ties with the people you least expect. Walking away from her was painful, but it was the only way to take my life back. And that's the end of this story, and with it, the final one in this batch. Thanks for spending your time here tonight and listening to these Reddit stories. I hope they helped you relax and gave you a moment to slow down. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe. It really helps me keep making more of these for you. Wishing you a peaceful night, and I'll see you in the next one.